Woman's in her late 40s, early 50s. She goes in and starts complaining about symptoms. It's like, oh, it's hormones. Here's your estrogen. Oh, you have a uterus. Here's your progesterone. But symptoms overlap. Even hot flashes, for example. Hot flashes can be because of fluctuating or low estrogen. That's what we think of. But it can also be because of lower progesterone levels. It can be because our blood sugar's off. It can be because we're stressed. And we might see that in our cortisol or, DHEA even.
Right.
And so looking at them all as part of the picture can be really helpful.
Welcome to Modern Menopause by Parlor Games. I'm your co-host Morven. I work for Parlor Games, and I'm with my other co-host, Dr. Robyn. She is our consulting physician and all-round expert in everything from hormones, saliva testing, menopause, and so much more. Which is very good, because today our deep dive topic is actually going to be saliva testing. So I'm actually going to kick this off with a funny story, because this just happened to me not that long ago. Which is, I went to my doctor and I had my blood test, my yearly blood test. My doctor comes back and she's like, everything's amazing. Everything's amazing. You look great. So wonderful. And I'm like, oh, okay. Cool. Bit weird though, because I'm not sleeping. I feel tired, tons of fatigue, not feeling fantastic. Anyway, around this time, I get my saliva test from Parlor Games, and I get that back, and it paints a very different picture. And I know we spoke about cortisol and thyroid, which was my issue. But today I thought we could talk a little bit about this experience for women, which is they go and they basically feel like they're being gaslit by their blood test because they go in and they're like, I feel like shit. To be blunt, right? They're like,
Yeah.
I feel terrible. I can't remember anyone's name, and I've worked with them for 12 years. I can barely remember my children's names. I'm having hot flashes. I seem to have gained 5 pounds overnight. And they go in and they get their blood tests, and their doctor's like, you look great. Fantastic. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful.
Everything's
You're
normal.
You're totally normal. You're fine. And then they kind of get kicked out of the office, wondering if they're going crazy, or if they go to Google and they're like, what things don't show up on blood tests, like what weird diseases don't show up on blood tests. And so let's take a deep dive here, because obviously saliva hormone testing is not as well known. Blood testing is something that we all get. It's covered by our insurance. It's pretty run-of-the-mill. There's more to the story, right?
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things going on here. And if we can just kind of step back and take a more general viewpoint, what a lot of people don't realize about labs in general, when I'm talking about our typical blood work that we have done, the reference range. So the reference range is what we compare somebody's results to. That reference range is set by an average of the people that go into that lab and have that test drawn for most things, not all things, but for most things. So think about, who's going into labs to have their blood work drawn. These are other people who also don't feel well. So what we're doing is we're taking that and creating a reference range from it and just making sure that everybody feels crummy together. It's not, we look at this reference range and think, I should fall in here and then I'm optimal. People want optimal, right? That's not the case for a lot of this, for a lot of things. And then we have to think it varies from lab to lab as well, because each lab is setting their own reference range. So it's really a fascinating system. And that goes for hormones, and it goes for things like our iron stores, all sorts of things. So the other thing that happens a lot, most women aren't actually even being offered blood tests for their hormones because they're told, especially if they're postmenopausal, your hormones are low. That's what they hear. Or if they're, transitioning into menopause or somewhere in that perimenopausal or even premenopausal, their hormones fluctuate too much for us to do anything about it. The testing isn't valuable. And I would change that caveat to the blood testing isn't very valuable. And I agree with that. Our hormones do fluctuate quite a bit throughout the day. And so if we go to have our blood work drawn, that snapshot in time, we can get a peak, we can get a trough, but then trough being the lower levels. And so if that happens one way or the other, it doesn't necessarily correlate to our symptoms. It's also that reference range that we talked about is so wide that unless somebody has a tumor that's producing hormones or something that's causing them not to produce hormones at all, they are very likely going to look normal because it's so big. And that reference range is designed to pick up something wrong. And the perimenopausal transition, menopause is a normal state every woman experiences. There's nothing wrong. Doesn't mean she feels good, but the labs aren't going to pick that up.
Right.
So, yeah.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, there's a couple different pieces to this problem, right? Which is women are going in and they're getting ranges that just don't really give them any information. Mm-hmm. The ranges themselves are only there to pick up something that's gone grossly wrong. That's, a huge, major, not necessarily life-threatening, but probably often that problem. And so most women are inside these ranges. Everything looks normal, great, fine. And then the other part of this problem is because of that, and because we know that women's hormones fluctuate, particularly in menopause, women are being told, you don't even need to do it. So then they're sort of left without any options, or at least feeling like there aren't many options for them to uncover what's happening. Kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, right? You go in, you're like, hey, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel good. And someone says, no, you're fine. Everything's normal. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's more, there's different ways to test hormones. We can get behind that. There's also, and I think this is maybe a topic for a whole nother show, but the philosophy behind hormone use for women is, you're symptomatic, take this estrogen. We don't need to test anything. Everything, that's what it is. It must be this. Oh, wait, you have a uterus. Let's protect that. Take this progestogen. And that progestogen might be, more often than not these days, it's progesterone, which is great, but that's not really utilized in helping women with their concerns. Or management of any of those. It's really just thought of as uterine protection, which we as a medical community need to shift our thoughts behind. But yes, and so there's just so much behind that, and we're lacking as a community. But there are good ways to test hormones. There's ways to account for those issues, those concerns that we raise with the blood testing.
Okay, well, talk to me a little bit about this because I've done the saliva hormone testing. It painted a very different picture from my blood test. This is something for anybody listening. If you're curious about this, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Be sure to send this to other people, to every woman. We also have some great blogs on this. We actually have my saliva hormone test, and we have Kirsty, one of our founders' hormone test, as blogs. We have these great videos with myself talking to Dr. Robyn, Kirsty talking to Dr. Robyn. We have pictures of the saliva testing results so you can see them because it's really interesting. I wish I had it, but I didn't post my blood test on there. But I wish, in hindsight, I should have posted it on the blog because you can see my blood test comes back and it's just fine. Everything's fine all the way down. And then you look at my saliva test and it paints this really different picture. So walk us through that for women of, hey, I'm going to dig further. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do a saliva hormone test. What are they seeing that's different from on this blood test where they're being gaslit?
Mm-hmm. the gaslighting blood test. Okay, so like you mentioned, Morven, that blood test really is designed to pick up something that's grossly wrong. In blood, what we're testing is the total hormones in the blood at that moment. So like you said, there's peaks and troughs, so we're going to draw blood, it's going to show us something, but these are total hormones. Total hormones are hormones that are bound to a protein. And proteins are what take our hormones to the tissues so they can go to work, so that we can think of them as a taxi or a bus. If, we're taking an Uber to work, we aren't at work yet. We're not doing our job. We're not getting paid. Nothing's happening. It's how many people are in the office doing the work, that really is going to affect the productivity of that day. Same concept here. So a hormone has to get to the tissues on its little protein Uber. And once it's at the tissues, it's what's in the tissues or not in the tissues that is that's at work, and that equates to what women experience as far as, let's say they're hot flashes or, mood swings or bloating or whatever. So it's the hormones at work that make the difference, and that's what we test in saliva. It's testing our bioavailable free hormone levels, things like that. And one thing to think about too is, like anybody, the hormones don't necessarily want to be at work. If they're on the Uber, they prefer to be in the Uber, right? doing whatever else. And so it depends on how many proteins we have to affect how much is there in the tissues. We have more proteins, we have less available for work. If we have less proteins, we're going to have more available for work. We don't test that in blood work. We can, but it's expensive. So we really only do it for research. Testosterone can be done that way, but again, it's just a peak or a trough at that moment. But everything else, no, we don't. And so we are not able to see in blood work who's at work. And that's what saliva is showing us. And like I mentioned, it's who's at work or who isn't at work that causes the picture women are complaining about.
Right.
The other thing with that is the cool thing about saliva is a woman's going to, a couple cool things. A woman's going to collect her samples 4 times over the course of a day. And at least with the lab that Parlor Game uses, a little bit from each sample, same amount from each sample is going to be taken to create a 5th sample. That 5th sample is what the hormones are tested from. So we're not getting the peak. We're not getting the trough. We're getting more of an average of the day. So it fits her clinical picture better. Then the other, what I would say cool thing about the testing itself is we can test a cortisol curve here. You know, when we're testing cortisol in saliva, we are not looking typically for disease states like Addison's or Cushing's. What we're measuring is something called the HPA axis, how well the body has been responding to stress. When there's chronic stress, that HPA axis can become dysregulated, and when that happens, we see a shift in our cortisol curve. And so that's where we measure cortisol multiple times throughout the day, in this case 4, and we see our new curve. Is that shifted from what we would expect to be more of an optimal curve to something outside of that, because that can equate to symptoms. And so a lot of people have heard about cortisol testing and they might ask their doctor for it, but in blood tests we're really just looking to see, we're looking for a disease state. Are we producing too much? Are we not producing enough? The likelihood of either of those is real small. But here we're measuring something completely different, which equates to a woman's picture. So we can see that there as well. And then depending on we talked about reference ranges being a problem in
Yes.
Previously, and not necessarily the case here. We can see some optimal, or we don't have like optimal as a medical community established for women, which we could talk about all day too. But
Right.
But we have some more common scenarios. You know, we have and saliva can show us some ratios that can be equated to maybe different clinical pictures or potential support in other areas, things like breast health, bone health, things like that we might see there. And we can see some more expected ranges there versus that big, really wide range. You know, what did we necessarily see when hormones were a little bit different when we were younger? We can see things there in those reference ranges that can be more beneficial than that really big range.
Right. So this is one of the interesting parts of saliva hormone testing, right? Is these alternative ranges, I'm going to say, that have this optimal ranges for women. And so now is probably a good time to actually switch to some of the questions that have been written in, because saliva testing, like anything, is so unique. It's unique to the individual. So it's hard for I'm guessing for you, Dr. Robyn, to talk about, you know, broad brushstrokes here, because everyone's profile on a saliva test is going to look really different. And yes, there might be some things that are shared across women in perimenopause or menopause. Everyone's is really unique, and we're going to start to get a clearer picture, which I think is what a lot of women want, right? They want this personalized picture of what's happening with me, not just, hey, I'm normal, everything's fine, but what's actually going on with my body, especially during perimenopause and menopause, where it can feel like you've been hit by a tsunami, like you're absolutely knackered, then the next day you're sweating all over the place. And so let's switch over to some of those questions. So for our listeners, if you're listening in for the first time, we always include in our podcast some questions from our listeners, from our customers. If you're ever wanting to add a question, be sure to use the form in our bio, and you can send us your own questions. So here we go. Should I combine blood and saliva testing for a more complete profile? Is one better than the other?
Oh, this is a great question. And if we're thinking about, you know, the population I think that's listening to this podcast and that tends to come to Parlor Games is usually, you know, perimenopausal and menopausal women who are experiencing unpleasant things in their life, like maybe brain fog or hot flashes or night sweats or what have you. And so, when that's the case, the most appropriate testing for this population of women is going to be saliva testing. Remember, it's what's in our tissues or not in our tissues that cause symptoms. And blood work and saliva is not comparing apples to apples. It's apples to oranges. So if this is what we're talking about, we're wanting to see, hey, what's my baseline levels, or even what's my levels on my current hormone regimen? How are they looking? We really don't need to compare them. The one place that I would think about comparing is if I get some really wonky saliva results, and I want to make sure that it's not a woman's body doing that. And the best example I have is, testosterone being really high on saliva. If testosterone's really high on saliva, I might test that in blood work just to confirm it's not high in blood work. That tells me that it's likely exposure and not her body doing that. So anyway, that's for most women, that's not going to be the case.
Here's a great question that was sent in. Are there other hormones I should be asking to test beyond estrogen and progesterone? I've heard things like cortisol, testosterone, and DHEA matter too. Should these be included?
Yeah, I would say, again, in this population, we're thinking about symptoms as they relate to our hormone levels or concerns as they relate to our hormone levels. Then, yes, I would want to see all of them. So everything this person asked, I'd want to see our estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, cortisol levels, maybe even thyroid if that hasn't been checked. Is what's interesting about hormones is, I mentioned in the beginning how we have this in typical circles, one size fits all approach to symptoms. A woman's in her late 40s, early 50s, whatever. She goes in and starts complaining about symptoms. It's like, oh, it's hormones. Here's your estrogen. Oh, you have a uterus. Here's your progesterone. But symptoms overlap just because, even hot flashes, for example. Hot flashes can be because of fluctuating or low estrogen. That's what we think of, but it can also be because of lower progesterone levels. It can be because our blood sugar's off. It can be because we're stressed, and we might see that in our cortisol or DHEA even. And so it's somebody's concern that they're experiencing does not code for the hormone that is off. Right. And so looking at them all as part of the picture can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's actually one of the coolest things about our hormone test. They test all three estrogens. So it's your estradiol, estrone, estriol, your progesterone, your DHEA, your testosterone, and then your cortisol 4 times a day, which is brutal because when Kate told me, she was like, you can't have your morning coffee. And I was like, well, we're not going to get very good test results. Don't do that. Here's a good question, and I think one that probably a lot of women experience, a lot of women have. Why is it that some doctors refuse to order hormone testing at all? I've heard it's not necessary or it's not accurate. What is behind that, and what can I do if my doctor won't help?
Yeah, this is where, a lot of what we've chatted about before, we use testing in medicine as a tool, and with hormone therapy still being considered a one-size-fits-all, even though it should be more individualized, this tool isn't needed, number one. The results that we get from our typical blood testing aren't helpful. There's typically no findings. Everyone's going to look normal. And it's considered not accurate because of the fluctuations in hormones. And so this is, again, the cool thing about saliva is it hits all those points. It just takes those arguments off the table.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. To our listeners, you're not alone if you hear that. We hear,
it's so
my
common.
doctor said I don't have any hormones. It's not true, which is an odd one. Like, I don't need to do it. All women in menopause are the same. We have like a whole list of them. They're great. Yeah. Not for the women who heard them, but
Well, and the other thing here too is we forget about this, but a lot of people, a lot of doctors, healthcare providers are associated with larger organizations. So maybe their doctor does know the difference, but it's not something that their organization allows them to do.
Yeah, which is a shame. Okay. Last one for today. This is all we've got time for. It's a good one. Are there reliable ways to do saliva testing on my own, and how would I even understand the results?
Yeah, great question. Parlor Games offers saliva testing that women can kind of click and purchase on their own. When you get saliva testing back through, at least through the Parlor Games ones, it's going to have some comments on there to help people understand what their results are, or what the test is showing them. They can also also choose to schedule with like a hormone coach through Parlor Games as well, which can help explain what they're seeing there as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for women out there. I think that we talk about maybe a lack of resources, and I think that this is probably the first domino, right? Is we joked around about, women are gaslit by their blood tests, but I think, as much as it's a joke, there is sort of a grain of truth in there that if you don't know what's going wrong, the idea of using any products to solve it does feel scary.
Yeah.
If I don't know why I can't sleep, do I use melatonin? Do I use, there's a bunch of marijuana like CBD products for it now. Do I use progesterone? Do I use magnesium? If you don't know why a problem is happening, it becomes increasingly challenging to choose the products that can help
Absolutely.
you, or to choose the I would say resources, because obviously there's more than just products. Sometimes it's lifestyle changes. So I think
there's a lot of things being marketed to women too. I'm going to right on the sleep thing for just a moment, because there's so much being marketed about high cortisol, and your cortisol must be high. And for a lot of women with chronic stress, their baseline levels, what saliva is testing, are actually going to show lower levels. So those women, being marketed, take this supplement that lowers cortisol, it's not going to help. And so there's so much out there, like you said.
Yeah. Thank you very much for everybody listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, you learned something from it, be sure to share it with others. Like I said, I think that this really is the first domino for a lot of women. It can probably change their perimenopause, change their menopause, if they can start to understand what's going on. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our next episode. And as always, if you have any questions, we have a form in our little blurb, our little bio, and you want to ask Dr. Robyn a question, we'd always love to hear from you. There's a chance you could be featured on the podcast. But that is all we have time for today. So sending everyone the best, and we hope that you listen to us next time.